Terry, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's, first get started. Even as I was preparing to meet with you today, had really not, I think, processed the interesting roles and places you've been in your career. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you started, what led you to where you're at today.
Well, I started way back in New England as an ad director for a chain of retail stores. I ended up at a chain of daily and weekly newspapers as a marketing leader. I quickly got promoted to editor and publisher of one newspaper, and then after starting several successful newspapers, I had responsibility for the group. I wasn't old enough to be afraid. I should have been, running a P&L with hundreds of people, but it was a great experience, and ultimately it was that experience as a credible news person that landed me my first corporate communications and labor relations role in GE. And since then, it's pretty much every manufacturing business that GE had. ABB, a huge competitor to GE, Lockheed Martin, Kraft Foods, and what is now US Foods, in executive labor relations and corporate communications roles. So
as a person that has an almost 20-year career, which is hard to admit, in marketing, I'm fascinated by the fact that you really foundationally started, and any marketer would tell you communications is a huge piece of it, and being able to do that effectively and sometimes subconsciously to your market. How is that in your perspective foundationally set you up for kind of where you're at today and how you view people and
Sure.
leadership and all that?
Well, everything that I did was connected to leadership and communications. Jack Welch used to say that 98% of his job was communications. And the statistics, I'm not just a labor geek, but I'm also a data geek as a Six Sigma Master Black Belt. The data says that highly effective communicators are 5 times as likely to be perceived as high-performing leaders. So we have leaders in front of us every week from companies all over North America. One of the things we tell them is, if you could control one thing, control your communications. Get better at being an effective communicator, because it will reflect on your career. What got you here won't get you there.
Very good. How would you define a healthy workplace culture?
Well, first of all, we define culture in very simple terms. You and I could get down to Barnes & Noble, Amazon.com, and buy any one of 100 books that has been written by academics and experts on culture. We define things very simply at PML. Culture is the way we do things around here. So when I was at GE, we had a West Point culture, which was you don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal, and you don't tolerate anybody who does. Which means if I knew you had committed an integrity violation and you didn't have the guts to turn yourself in, I had to do it because I was just as responsible as you, knowing about it.
So that makes me think of, and maybe you have some data to back this that I'm not even familiar with, there's a concept of leading with empathy and having empathetic leadership impacting your bottom line at the end of the day.
Yep.
Would you say that's kind of what's going on there?
Absolutely.
A little bit? And
Absolutely.
Any other experience you have witnessing that?
Yeah, Elena, we follow McKinsey, the Brookings Institute, the Pew Research Center.
Yeah.
We follow Gallup, and there is a tremendous amount of data that is available for business leaders to see the straight line. I'm not talking about correlation. I'm talking about the straight line causation between employees who feel empowered, cared for, connected with their managers and connected with others in the business, and a company's growth and productivity. What we haven't talked about a lot in this country, what I don't hear business leaders talking about when we're in front of them in meetings, is the productivity crisis that we have in America. Since the pandemic, productivity has gone in the tank. Productivity, engagement, and the perception of employee well-being, which is that feeling that I'm cared for. when organizations make sure that people feel connected to the manager, have connections with those in the workforce such that they feel like they've got best friends who work with them, they're more engaged, they stay, they don't leave, they have a higher sense of well-being, and the company has higher income and net profits. You know, James Carville in 1992 was the strategist on Bill Clinton's campaign against Mr. Bush. And in answer to a question one day from a reporter about what he thought voters were interested in, he said something famous. He said, "It's the economy, stupid." And he said stupid to jolt you out of your complacency and to get your attention. I'm going to say something equally provocative. I don't care whether it's donuts or dump trucks that you make. It's the people, stupid. It's the people. You can't make the products without the people. You can't make them without turned-on, effective, engaged leaders, creating turned-on, effective, engaged members of the workforce.
Well, that's a good segue, because we were talking about culture, but ultimately that the reason you have culture in the first place is because it means something to the employee. So kind of to that, so you talk about this productivity crisis, which is a little bit intriguing to me, because you would hope that the opposite is true, because you have shifts in how people are working, of people working from home, and there's been a lot of belief that might lead to more productivity. And I think a lot of employees believe that they might be more productive. And then you also have, we've seen a little bit of a shift in maybe hours worked, or that there's a desire for flexibility. Maybe not all employers have jumped on board there. So when you talk about a productivity crisis, what's driving that? Because you would think the opposite is true.
Let me burst your bubble. More Americans are working. More Americans are actually working fewer hours. That's part of what I think may be driving the productivity crisis. But Americans are being more Americans are working. They're being paid more, and they're working less. So think about the paradox.
Right.
So where is business? Where is capital, which needs labor? Where is capital getting its productivity? It isn't from labor. It's from automation. It's from that. It causes the variable cost productivity, or indirect or direct labor. It causes that number to skew when you add automation to it. And I believe over the last 2 decades, the data says over the last 2 decades, businesses have been investing heavily in automation. And just take a look at what's happening as the wages rise in the fast food industry in California. All of a sudden, you're seeing self-serve kiosks. You're seeing robots that can make French fries and shakes and can flip hamburgers. That's where it's going to go. And the cost of, when capital and labor have an equal balance, capital needs as much from labor as labor needs from capital. It's a healthy thing. We tell leaders who come to us that there must be balance, there must be equilibrium between capital and labor. When business needs more from labor than labor is either willing or can give, bad things happen. When labor needs more from business, when they can or are willing to give, then bad things happen. That's when you get strikes. But in tough and tight labor markets, as we've experienced in the last 4 years, labor has had to fork over more capital, not labor. Capital has had to fork over more money in terms of wages, benefits, flexibility in work schedules, et cetera, to keep its workforce. Now we're entering a period of recessionary, the headwinds coming out of the north are blowing recession. And those who follow this at McKinsey and others say within the next 6 months, we could see signs of a recession. Unemployment is expected to rise in every corner of the world, from China to Vietnam to Canada and Europe. Unemployment is expected to rise. And when unemployment rises, now all of a sudden capital has more of the weight on its side in terms of the balance, and labor has to give in more, which means you probably see fewer strikes because they'll be less effective. I believe that over time, we're also moving away from what I would call a we culture in our society, where the individual is stupid and the collective is smarter than everybody else, back to a me part of our society. Which the last time we saw that was during the introduction of K-cups, the iPod, the iPhone, when everything was about me. We're moving back to that me place. And the collective will have less power. Just like in the last 10 years, the collective has had more power.
Right. It has.
It's a great book called Pendulum. You can pick it up.
Okay.
It predicts these things.
So automation and the equilibrium you just talked about, where does automation fall into that? And how does it impact it, maybe even in a positive way, or how could it? How do you see businesses maybe using it
Great
for the
question.
better?
That's the sneak attack question to try to get me to reveal how old I am, right? I'm not going to do that, but I'm a lot older than I look. I am really way deep in boomer territory.
Okay.
There has been, since I have been in the world of business, there have been investments in automation, which have ultimately helped businesses to offset workplaces that are more dangerous for workers. You know, the repetitive motion disorder is a real thing, and it's dangerous for workers who do this all day long. That could be done better by a robot with less injury to human beings. And as we've invested in automation, we've had to invest in people who maintain the robots, install the robots, program the robots, repair the robots. There have been legions of people who've gone to school and done a skills mix shift away from pure turning wrenches to software and programming. That's the natural order of things. We're going to see more investment as AI begins to be, as companies and individuals become more comfortable with AI. I think we'll see more investment in. I mean, BMW's investing. They just finished testing a humanoid on the plant floor in Plant Spartanburg, a bunch of them, and everybody that I know at BMW at Plant Spartanburg is chirping about it because they're afraid that it's going to take their jobs. I maintain it's going to create more jobs.
Right.
Because those people who the humanoids' jobs will take, because they're dangerous for humans to do them, will require humans to maintain the humanoids.
Yeah. Which hopefully, well, maybe we'll get into a little bit what motivates people, but will help create that sense of purpose for the employee and add to their skills and add to their career path and how they contribute to their own families and so on and so forth.
There are some statistically significant influencers for attitude and behavior in the workplace. Mm-hmm. Among the four are mastery, the need that we all have to get better at things, even things that aren't directly related to our job. I mean, hey, if I can get better at swinging a golf club by doing something on my job so I can go out on the course over the weekend and grab another birdie, right. I'm a happy guy.
Right.
So mastery, autonomy. We humans, we like independent, autonomous work very much. We like being able to do it creatively. And one of the big statistically significant demotivators of people are leaders who are control freaks, and they lord over their people and don't let them exercise any of that creativity to do their jobs. So mastery, autonomy, creativity, and purpose. The most statistically significant being purpose. Think about it. The Marines have a purpose. They're the only branch of the military that actively communicates about their purpose. You can see it on their billboards in the upstate all the way down to Charleston. Marines, our mission is our purpose. They have been very successful about communicating about that purpose. It also happens to be that they're the only branch of the military that is meeting their recruitment goals. The only branch. Hyundai has a purpose. Hyundai's purpose is about mobility. And if you look on their website, everything about their company's purpose is about helping people be mobile. Everything from the robotic auto taxi that can climb up tenement stairs at a building to allow someone who's late, bound to a wheelchair to get into the robo-taxi and climb back down again and then go somewhere. That's mobility. That's what that company's purpose is about. My company's purpose, we're about helping to change leadership behaviors. We know that when we make better, stronger, more effective leaders, we get better, stronger, more effective humans. And what the research says is that most of the people whom we're hiring into our workplaces today, Gen Z and soon will be Gen A for Alpha.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, yeah. It's also known as Gen C for COVID.
I don't even know if I've heard that yet, which is kind of sad.
You think about this generation. They've been influenced by isolation, remote work, for parents, remote schooling for kids.
Yep.
I believe
my
that they are
daughter.
socially behind. That's the most polite way I could say it. I have granddaughters who are in that generation. They don't know how to communicate with another human being, much less the mother and father or grandfather and
True
grandmother.
story. My daughter does not, I can't get her to hold a phone properly. Can you please hold it up to your ear? She used to AirPods, just goes on speaker. And even when I'm traveling, I can't hear you. Can you hold it up properly? So yeah.
Well, they're entering the workplace.
Yeah.
They are the first truly mobile-only generation.
Yeah.
They were born with smartphones in their pockets
Right.
and in their hands, and their moms are nursing young children in this generational cohort while they're using smartphones and tablets. And what the early research says is we may be changing the way babies' brains are developing as a result. And I don't know what that means. I think
to be determined.
Yeah, to be determined. But this generation needs connectedness. They need connected to networks. And if it's not an online network, they need to be connected to a human network, which is all the more reason to have those affinity groups at work. Like the African American Forum, the Hispanic Forum, the Asian Forum, whatever you want to call it. The left-handed egg flippers forum, whatever. But these folks need that connectedness because they've had it since they were born. They can't come to work and turn it off and be happy. And if they can't be connected, they'll leave. So what I'm telling smart leaders is get with the program. Find a way like BMW just did to allow cell phones to be used on the floor while people are doing their work. They always used to go in a locker. Now more and more manufacturers of discrete products are allowing the use of cell phones, not just because people can be connected, but because young people feel safer when they have, and it's the number one workplace concern of the generation that's coming to work today is workplace safety. Number one.
I've heard, you talk about connectedness. I think about the need for people to be face to face, sometimes at least, but I hadn't really thought about if a generation is their connectiveness comes from a device and you're removing that, what that does.
Think about it, Elena. This generation has scores, if not hundreds of friends they've never met but for on a social media site.
Right. Yeah.
We may be changing the very definition of true pal and friend.
Right.
Yeah, I got a true pal. He lives in, Estonia. I've never met him but for Facebook.
So how do you see employers, or where do you see leaders needing, or what do you recommend to them when you talk about, because there are 4 generations in the workplace, and we work a lot with manufacturers. I know you are familiar with that space, very familiar, and you have these dynamics. How do you meet the needs of all those people at once?
I'd come back to my message earlier. It's about the people, stupid. So let's focus on employee well-being. Don't roll your eyes, Mr. Manufacturing or Ms. Materials Manager. Don't roll your eyes. It's not a Gen Z thing. Sense of well-being is what every employee expects from their employer. They want to feel safe at work. They want to feel psychologically safe at work. They want to feel like they can learn new skills that they can use to develop that mastery somewhere else, or maybe get better in the workplace. So that sense of well-being is first and foremost. It drives engagement. It's not about employee satisfaction. It's not about people walking around with smiles on their face. The Joker had a smile on his face. It was painted there. It's about people who feel like their managers care about them. because the managers demonstrate care and concern for the workforce. Find ways to be flexible. I know you might not be able to think yourself about ways we could be flexible to build tires or build automobiles or build airplanes. But I'll bet if you got a group of your associates together in a room and said, what does flexibility mean to you? They'll tell you. And it may mean, geez, I'd like to be able to change my schedule to come in, an hour later in the morning, 3 days a week, and leave an hour later, 3 days a week. Whatever it is, that equals flexibility. We're not going to be able to produce tires or automobiles or airplanes in a work-from-home format, but we could certainly find ways to be creative and exercise more flexibility to meet the needs of people who are coming to work every day. Sean O'Brien said something at the Republican National Convention. I'm no friend of Sean O'Brien, but I did watch what he said and I listened to what he said. And what he said was, it was 4 years ago that we used to call people essential workers. They're still essential. They come to work every day and they do essential work. Why is it that we don't think they're essential anymore? That's an attitude. We can change attitudes. We have to think of our workforce as, aside from all the colloquialisms about them being the greatest asset we have, and it's the only way you can produce what you produce or serve what you serve. It's the only way is with turned on, effective, engaged humans. It's the people, stupid.
It's the people, stupid. That's what we're taking away today.
So one way that we can address the engagement crisis in our country is by telling people what it is that we expect. In fact, what the data says is that most people don't know what their managers expect of them on the job. If someone doesn't know what you expect of them on the job, what chance on God's green earth do they have of meeting your expectations? The reason why we have to tell people about what we expect is because in statistically significant terms, 96% of every population of N will strive to meet your expectations if they know what they are. That means we have to tell people what it is that we expect. And then once we tell them what we expect, we have to coach them. We have to give them feedback. This generation craves feedback. It's a craving. It's written in invisible ink on their foreheads. I crave feedback. And if feedback is on your calendar for the first Monday of every quarter, no, you're not meeting the needs of your associates. Your associates have a need for feedback every day. Every conversation should be a coaching conversation. And what the data says about coaching conversations is that when we focus on the strengths of an individual and how they can apply their strengths to meeting the needs of the company as opposed to their development needs, you get engagement. You get retention. You get people who don't want to leave because they now know how they can use what they're good at to help the company. That's not rocket science. We don't have to send a man to the moon to figure this out. It's about the people, stupid. Just give people what it is that they need and what they crave.
The concept makes me laugh because I guess in a former life, you talk a lot about marriages and unspoken expectations. What's one of the biggest issues is we didn't say what we needed or wanted. But then also a former friend of mine, or a friend, I should say, he used to work a lot with adolescent youth that had grown up in a little more traumatic situations. And the thought and the approach often was that those kids did not do well because they weren't motivated. And he always said, it's not that they weren't motivated, it's that they might not have the skill, they might not know. It was always a lack of skill, not a lack of motivation. And when you change your approach, similar thing, where if you're clear on your expectations, and then also it opens up the conversation for what do you need so that you can meet those expectations. It's a very different narrative, even as an employer and a leader, than saying you're not motivated to do this, you're lazy. There's so many other, it shifts that, which.
Elena, we use this metaphor in our conversations with leaders. We always tell them, you're in your job because the company expects you to make it better. You're not in your job to make things worse. You're in your job to make things better. That means the company gives you the keys to a house in the company subdivision and they expect you to run your house. That's your house. Don't you bring your tardiness or your absenteeism problems to your HR associate. That's your house. That's your problem. You have to fix that. You don't take your performance issues to HR. It's your job to lean in and fix it. It's your house. If Johnny came home from school and said, Mom, I want to stay up playing video games with Sammy till 11 o'clock at night because Sammy's mom lets him do it, I know what your answer is going to be. No, young man, you're going to be in bed at 9 so you can get your butt up tomorrow morning and go to school and get good grades.
Right.
You want to play video games till 11 o'clock? Then pack up your things and move to Sammy's house, but you're not going to live here. We're going to tell people, no, you're not, because this is my house.
Yep.
Managers and leaders sometimes forget that it's their house. That work area in the plant, that work area in a store or a warehouse is your work area. The company gave you the keys to it to run it. And they didn't give you the keys to run it and pay you all that money so you could go run into HR with all your problems. You go to HR to ask for help and to ask for advice and counsel. But it's your problem to fix because you're the leader. That's your house.
You know, as part of MAU, I'll share this as the marketer in me. We have a core group of solutions that we have coined now under this umbrella of MAU Ascent. And really the belief that manufacturers, companies in manufacturing and supply chain are truly on a climb right now to figuring out how to navigate a whole lot of change post-pandemic, even before the pandemic. When you think about that climb that they got to take, what are 2 to 3 things that they should be taking on their journey to help them kind of overcome some of the stuff even you've talked about today?
I think it boils down to, back to the concept that we talked about earlier. It's about the people stupid. There are 3 basic questions that every employee asks every day on the workplace. Do you care about me? Can you help me? Do I trust you? And every leader has to see their workplace and their relationships with their people through that prism. We like to say that, look, we know this. Knowledge always precedes trust. I can't trust you until I know you. Knowing you requires you to allow yourself to be known, requires you to be vulnerable enough for me and others to know you. Trust is the currency of relationships. But if trust is the currency of relationships, relationships are the currencies of work. We have to have relationships with the people who do the work, or we don't get the right to make the tires, the cars, or the airplanes. We don't get the right to sell the groceries or put stuff on boxes and trucks that go to where they're be delivered. We don't get the right to do that unless we've got relationships with the people first. Trusting, dignified, respectful relationships. Those are the 3 things.
And then so similar, but whether you're leading one person or 1,000 or 10,000, what's the biggest thing they can do that makes an impact for their people every day? The one person they lead or the thousands?
Yeah, I would say know their names. Because today many supervisors have spans of control that are large and unwieldy. But the most important word in anybody's vocabulary is their name, no matter what their language is. It's their name. And then once you know their name, you have to be able to write 150 words about each and every one of your associates. I'm talking about not words about work, words about Joe Snuffy at home. Is Joe married? Is Joe separated, divorced? Is Joe a single parent? Does Joe have kids? If so, what are their names? What are their ages? Does Joe have a dog named Spot and a parakeet named Chirpy? Does Joe, what does Joe like to do when he's not working for the company? What does Joe want to do with the skills he's learned at the company? What keeps Joe up at night? If you can write 150 words about each and every one of your associates, then I would say you probably know your associates. But I would guarantee you know your associates if they know you. If they could write 150 words about you. Are you a single parent? Are you married, divorced, separated? Do you have kids? If so, how many? What are their names? Do you have a dog named Spot, a parakeet named Chirpy? What do you like to do when you're not working for the company? What You know, what do you want to do with your skills that you've learned at the company? What keeps you up at night? If you both know enough to write 150 words about each other, you know each other. And if you don't, I tell leaders, don't fool yourself and don't sit there and try to BS me. You don't know your people, pure and simple. You got to know your people. They have to know you know them. They have to know that you care about them and are concerned about them. It's about the people, stupid. It's really that simple.
Okay, so I think I know the answer to this question. I have one last question. Okay. If you could put a billboard on the highway in the most important place, I don't care what city or whatever, again, I think I know the answer. What is the message that you would put on that billboard?
Beer me. No, no, I'm only kidding. No, I mean, if we're talking about the world of work, it's find a way to simply articulate your purpose like the Marines have done. Our mission is our purpose. Or make sure that that billboard communicates in as few words as possible just how much you deeply care about people who work for you.
But also for PML, I'm very sure at this point that you need a billboard that says it's about the people, stupid.
It's about the people, stupid.
Yeah.
We say it in every one of our programs.
I love it. I love it.
We could thank James Carville for that inspiration.
Okay. From 30 years ago.
He's a curmudgeon and he's still alive.
Well, thank you, Terry.
Yes, ma'am.
Pleasure
Thank you.
having you.
It's been my pleasure as well.